Hey, good evening. It's Pastor Nate Dubbs here, and I'm so happy to once again have you join for another program of Unchained. Every night we're coming together and we're looking for hope and healing in the midst of addiction. So whether you've been coming every night and joining in, or perhaps this is your first time, we're so glad that you're able to be here. In fact, as we've kind of made it a habit of doing, we always like to see where you're watching from. So we want to encourage you to put that in the comment section right now, where you're watching from. Again, we always do look at this. I'm not able to see it right now on my screen, but during a break, we always go in and look at where you're watching from. We always like to see where you're coming from. So we want to encourage you to put that in the chat section. If it's Cleveland or if it's Collegedale or Ottawa, put where you're watching from. We'd love to see that. Also, if you're interested, hit the like button or the share button. Maybe there's someone else who could benefit from seeing what we're doing here tonight too, and we want to encourage you to do that. We're excited about our program this evening, and we want to remind you, if you haven't taken the chance to register for this event, we want to encourage you to do that. We'll put the registration code up on the screen here in just a moment, but every night, if you click on the registration link, you'll be entered to win a live drawing of Richie Halverson, our presenter's book, The Darkness Will Not Overcome. We want to make sure that you receive this book, and yet to enter into the nightly drawing, you do need to click on that registration link every night. So once again, it's on your screen right now. We encourage you to click on that, sign up, and you'll get reminders every evening about the program that's taking place. Usually around 7 o'clock is when I get my reminder. So we want to encourage you to sign up for that. Also, we want to remind you that we're going to be having a Q&A time at the end of our program this evening. And if there's questions tonight as you're watching, particularly as you're listening to our interview, if there's questions that come to mind, we want to encourage you to use the link in the video description or in the comments. You'll see a link where you can click on it. It'll take you to a Google form where you're able to anonymously ask questions for our Q&A session at the end of the program. With that said, let's dive in. This evening, I'm so happy to have our guest with us here in our studio, Dick Tibbetts. Dick, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Nate.
Dick, we're excited to have you here. Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, let me tell you about what I've done. So
Yes.
I've been a pastor, conference youth director, a licensed mental health counselor, a hospital administrator. I've written 2 books, Forgive to Live and The Stress Recovery Effect. And most recently, I've been a performance coach. I work with athletes literally around the world to perform their best in the sport. And I focus on motorcycle racing.
Yeah, that is really, it's always fun to talk with you and just hear some of your stories. Just a very well-lived life. It's really neat to see some of that. And I'm so glad that you can be here today. You mentioned that you're an author of a book. I actually have your book right here, Forgive to Live. The reason I have it here is I remember years ago, I was wanting to learn more about the topic of forgiveness myself. And I came across your book. It was someone recommended it to me. So I remember reading this book years ago, found it really, really helpful. And it was so neat just a few years ago to find out that you, the author of the book, are right here in our own community here in the Collegedale area. So it's been fun to do that. You have some real wisdom on the topic of many things, particularly forgiveness. But tonight I've asked you to come and share, as we're focusing on addictions. You're here because you've struggled with using blame as a way of dealing with problems, which admittedly is not something that we may often think of as an addiction. Can you share with us, just before we get into your story, a little bit about how blame as a way of dealing with your problems can be an addictive thing?
So an addiction has 3 primary components. The first component is to avoid the pain, to avoid the problems, the underlying problems. And blame does that well. It's not my fault. They did it. And by blaming someone else, I remove the problem from me and thus relieve some of the pain and pressure associated with that. The second quality of addiction is that euphoric feeling better, feeling good. And you know, one author once said, there's nothing sweeter than the sweet taste of revenge. You know, thinking about how I'm going to get even with someone, how I'm going to get back at someone. I can really fantasize about that, and that becomes addictive because I may never do it, but it feels good to think about it.
Sure, that makes sense.
And the third element of addiction is it doesn't work. In fact, not only does it not work, it makes things worse. And with blame, I'm not fixing anything, I'm not addressing anything, I'm simply pointing my finger at who I think's at fault. And then expecting them to do something to get me out of my predicament. And of course, the reality is they're not interested, they're not going to do anything. And so it's a vicious cycle of feeling pain, trying to escape that pain, fantasizing in something that gives me a squirt of adrenaline and makes me feel good for a moment, but ultimately realizing that a lifestyle of blame, a cycle of blame, makes things worse. It digs the pit deeper, and it causes me to be more stuck and not free.
I appreciate you giving that. You know, as we talked about this ahead of time, you know, the thought that came to my mind is, I wonder how many of us have this addiction under the surface and maybe aren't even aware of it. So thank you so much for being here this evening to talk about blame. And I wonder, could you share, when did that particular chain show up in your personal life?
It's interesting. As far back as I know, it's been there.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that crystallizes it in my mind is in our home where I grew up, there was hanging on the wall was a plaque, and on the plaque was a doghouse and 4 hooks, plus a hook in the doghouse, 5 hooks. And in my family of origin, there was 5 of us, my mom, my dad, myself, my sister, and my brother. And the family tradition was every morning at breakfast, we would review the previous day. And the discussion was around who was good or who was bad.
Okay.
And so you learn to jump in quickly and point out the faults of others.
Okay.
Because if you didn't, they would jump in and point out your faults. And the consequence of that was I often ended up in the doghouse. In fact, I like to say that I probably grew up in the doghouse.
So they would move like a chain with your name on it or a hook with your name on it and literally put it on a physical like image of a doghouse type of thing.
Yes, and not only that, it would stay there till the next morning.
Okay.
And so every time you sat down for lunch or supper or walked through the kitchen, it was a reminder that you should do better. And so what it taught me very early on is that the way you deal with problems is to figure out who to blame.
To just not be the person who's in the doghouse.
To not be the person who's in the doghouse.
Wow.
And you do that by blaming someone else. And that was the origin of kind of, I would say, my critical behaviors. I easily criticize other people. Of course, what that did is it put it on them rather than me. And of course, if you criticize somebody, then they must be doing something wrong. It's their fault. And so I developed this very critical, sharp tongue where I found the faults of others rather quickly.
Nice.
Of course, there's a blind spot in all of that, and I didn't see my faults so quickly.
Right. That's one of the challenges, of course,
It
when,
really
when
is.
you're blaming others, for sure. So you kind of grew up with this tendency, and you know, sharing that story. There's almost always a reason behind the things that we carry through us with us throughout life.
Yeah.
And it's very understandable to see, you know, just this almost a coping mechanism. Hey, to protect yourself from getting in the doghouse, I'm going to look for what's wrong in everyone else except for myself. And as long as I can make them look a little bit worse, I won't be the one in the doghouse.
You know, and that's not unique to me. In fact, if you go back, where did this whole blame strategy begin? It takes you right back to the Garden of Eden. And when Christ came down after Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, and he said, what's going on here? It's interesting, the responses. Adam responded and says, the woman that you made, God,
He blamed.
she's the one. And then what does she do? She said, the serpent convinced me.
They just keep passing it off.
They keep blaming. And so from the very beginning, from the very first problem ever mentioned in literature in the scriptures, blame became a default way of escaping the guilt and the shame that we're trying to cover up.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. You know, from a biblical worldview, it's this addiction, this propensity, you could say, that we have towards taking the focus off of ourselves and putting it anywhere else. And when it comes to negative things, it's always been there. It's been part of humanity.
It's in our marriages, it's in our work, it's in our churches, it's everywhere. And if you pay attention to it, you will see it in yourself as well. How easy it is to blame. Simple little things. For example, my wife's name is Arda, and I'll say, Arda, where are my glasses? She'll say, don't blame me, I don't wear them. And while my intent wasn't to blame, there's a blame in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I can't find them, what did you do with them?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so you kind of grew up with this taking place, and how did you notice it negatively affecting your life as you know, looking back and realizing what was there?
You know, part of the problem with addiction is you don't see it.
Sure.
Until a bottom is hit. And I was in my career, 20 years into my career, and I got laid off from work. And you know, that's not so unusual, except when your work is your identity. It's not just a job. It's who you are, what you do, what you achieve. It defines yourself as successful. And all of a sudden to come into work and have your boss tell you that today's your last day.
And this was unexpected.
Totally unexpected and rapid. So we've put a box in your office. We want you to leave here, go to your office, put all your personal belongings in the box, and be off the campus before noon today.
And that was it. You went from coming in feeling like you know, just a normal day in the office to you're gone by noon.
No farewell party, no goodbye, just disappear. I mean, you really literally feel like yesterday's newspaper. It has no value today, throw it away. I mean, 10 years in this organization with excellent reviews, and all of a sudden to be told, we don't need you, we don't want you, disappear. Well, at first, you know, my first reaction to that was shock.
Yeah.
I went numb. I can't believe this happened. I'm putting stuff in my box and I'm not even knowing what I'm doing. I take the box home. I'm home all alone in the afternoon because my daughter's in high school, my wife is working.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about, they're coming home. What do I tell them?
Yeah.
How do I tell them this? And as I'm sitting there, I'm getting more and more angry. And all of a sudden I started thinking, this isn't my fault. My boss doesn't like me. He did this to me. I don't know why he did it. And I started to fantasize on that, and blame started taking over. And by the time my wife got home, I had this whole story built up of how I was hit blindsided by someone who was out to get me. That's blame.
Absolutely. And that's a heavy story. You know, that we hope that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but it can. There's unexpected things that happen in life. And for you, how did you experience this being negative in your life as you realized, again, as you kind of look back on it now, what was it like to have blame being part of how you dealt with this issue?
Oh, it was terrible. So let's talk about what happened to me over the next weeks. I had no work to go to, and that was my identity. So I had no hobbies. I didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And so I'm turning on TV. Well, what's on TV in the middle of the day? Soap operas. And what's on soap operas? All the difficulties of life, how this person betrayed this person, how this person lied about this person. And I'm thinking, that's me.
That's your life. You're living a soap opera.
Yeah. And I'm getting angry, but the anger has nowhere to go. So I'm getting depressed because the definition of depression is simply anger turned inward. And depression was leading to some physiological problems. I wasn't eating right. I was eating a lot of junk food because it gave me quick satisfaction. I was gaining weight. I wasn't exercising. I was just sitting. I remember going to see my doctor, and he says, something's wrong. And I go, yeah, something's wrong. I've been treated poorly.
Yeah. It
not
just
my
came
fault.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my fault. This happened to me, and because of that, these are the consequences. And so I was developing, I was overweight. I was developing some initial high blood pressure that needed to be treated. I wasn't eating right. My food wasn't settling right. And I just felt uncomfortable all the time. But worse than that was the psychological damage.
I was going to ask about like what your thoughts were at this time. And
well, think about it. I don't want to go to work for anyone ever again.
yeah.
Why should I trust my future to someone who can turn on a dime and throw me away? So I'm thinking, what can I do? I'll never forget, a pastor friend of mine called me up one night. He was discouraged in his work, and he didn't know that I was fired.
Okay.
And he says, you know, I've been thinking. He says, I've been doing some research, and we can buy a pickup truck, put a vacuum cleaner on it, and from midnight to 8 in the morning, we can vacuum out shopping mall parking lots. Can you imagine that look attractive to me?
That wasn't what you were going for.
Yeah, I mean, but it was a way of escaping and avoiding. I didn't want to put myself back into someone else's hands again. I didn't want to work for someone else. And yet, everything I learned to do was working with others, working in organizations. So I didn't fit. And so I can remember people talking to me, would I be interested in a job here? I said, no, not really.
So it was really limiting you from even moving forward in life.
It was holding me in a trap that I didn't realize.
Yeah.
My bitterness, my resentment, the blame that I put on others had me caught in a spiraling web that was getting worse and worse.
So when you were in those moments, Is it correct to say that, again, you weren't aware of an issue of blaming anyone? For you, you were just experiencing frustration and anger?
And justifying it because somebody else did something to me. So blame happens, there's a trigger, something happens. There's an interpretation, how I interpret that. And then there's the actions and thoughts that follow that. So the trigger was I got fired. The interpretation was they were out to get me. They didn't like me, which later on I found out wasn't true. But at the time,
But it felt very real.
that was my interpretation.
Yes.
And then the resulting thoughts became very depressive, very dark. I'm an outgoing personality. I tend to be an optimist. And now all of a sudden everything is dark. It won't work. It's not good. I'm not going to. And I lived there for about 18 months.
And so in many ways, compared to what a normal life is like for you, which is, like you said, you're kind of more outgoing, these types of things, it really did chain you down. It was chaining you in the past and chaining you also to not a good past, but the most, angering parts of that story.
Well, and that's what blame does. You see, blame tricks the mind into thinking all or nothing, black and white. And so I'll give you an example of that. You've heard the expression, love is blind, which basically means if I'm in love with someone, I only see their good attributes.
Yeah.
Well, anger is equally as blind. When I'm angry at something, I only see the bad attributes.
Yeah.
Blame is an all or nothing thinking. And once that switch gets turned, the job I loved, the people I enjoyed working with, all became dark. It was a terrible place to work. The people I worked with betrayed me. They must have lied about me. How else would I have been let go?
Yeah.
And so I'm in this all or nothing thinking. I couldn't think about anything good. And then that starts to color everything. So everything becomes dark. Everything is a problem. I blame everyone and everything. My wife, I was blaming her. She was trying to get me to cheer up. And I go, stop trying to change me and make me something I'm not. This is who I am.
Yeah.
But I wasn't that person. I mean, I was, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I was trapped, and until I could get out of that trap, my life remained dark.
Yeah. And so for you, what was the journey out of that like? How did you begin to pull out of that kind of addiction that you're describing of blaming?
So there's a couple of realities I think came into play. Number one, you can't live forever without income.
Yeah, that kind of comes in handy. At some point it catches up.
At some point it catches up. When you deplete your retirement account, your
Yes.
IRA, and all your savings, you start to get desperate.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll get a job, but I won't like it.
Yeah.
You see how my thoughts are
Yeah.
coloring. But what also started to happen is this blame is something that I was hoping and wishing someone else would jump in and help me, especially the people who caused the pain. But they had moved on with their life. They had gone on alone. And it finally dawned on me that this is my problem. And either I deal with it or this is my new life. And
you didn't like that new life.
I didn't like it, but I became addicted to it. It was, it feels good to blame other people.
Yeah.
Because I'm not responsible. And if I'm not responsible, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And I might want to do something, but really there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And what I had to come to the place was, I need to let this go. I need to retake my life. And so I discovered, even though I had known about it, I discovered forgiveness as a way of releasing me from blame. And rather than blaming that person, I chose to forgive that person. Now, didn't happen overnight.
Sure.
Didn't happen quickly. But that was a process that I started. And that was my journey out. It took months. I can't tell you it just went like that. But what I did is every time I started to blame someone, I stopped and said, that's my addiction. Unless I change it, I'll never leave that addiction. I will be trapped by it. And so through a cognitive reframing process of stop, what are your alternatives? Try forgiveness and see how it works. Moving forward, sliding back. Moving forward, sliding back. Through that process, eventually the darkness started to crack. Eventually I got a job. And I didn't want that job. But you know what? As I started to work with people, I found people are nice. It's the way they used to be before.
Before.
Yeah.
Yes.
And most people are genuinely good. And so those things started to awaken in me a past that I had buried and started to create a future that became attractive to me.
That's interesting. So as you practiced forgiveness, letting go of the anger and the blame, it allowed, a resurrection essentially of a good life before this all had happened.
Yeah, and you have to be patient with yourself because it's not a linear, straight line journey. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But as you keep applying that, you'll find that the steps forward start to outnumber the steps back. And so I found 2 things that work: intensity and frequency. The frequency of the blaming and the anger started to diminish, slowly but diminish. And the frequency, no longer, before that was my dominant thought all day long. That's all I could think about. And now I was thinking about it sometimes, but I was letting it go sometimes.
Which is such an important thing, I think, to point out sometimes when we're trying to make changes in life. I think many of us, when we're trying to get something out of our life that we don't want there anymore, we want it gone now. And that's fair. I mean, we often pray for things like this. And sometimes it happens that way, but other times it's a slower journey out. And I think that's good advice to note that, while there might be a presence of something in your life, that perhaps the frequency or the intensity, if we look for that growth in those things becoming less, then that, instead of just making our one thing that we're tracking is something still in my life, that can be a hard thing because something can remain in your life for quite some time. But if we're changing what our goal, what we're tracking, essentially the intensity or the frequency of it, we can see potential progress forward.
Yes.
And that can be encouraging for people, I think, probably on their journey. So you went through this, and some changes had to be made, changing some mental frameworks. And was it, as you realized that forgiveness and not blaming others was bringing some freedom into your life, was there part of you that wanted to hold on to the blame? Was it difficult to give that up in the sense of not just the habit of blaming, but was there part of it that felt safe and comforting that you wanted to hold on to?
The answer is yes. And I'll share with you a quick story that illustrates that. So the boss who let me go, 8 years later, transferred to the company that I was working in.
Oh, really?
And he became my boss's boss.
Okay.
And so, while I thought I had forgiven him and let that go, all of a sudden, all the old tapes started playing again. In some cases, you would call this a relapse.
Yeah.
I went right back to where I was. And so I wondered, should I quit my job? He's going to fire me anyhow.
Yeah.
He doesn't like me. Yeah. And I could have gone down that trail very easily. In fact, I started down that trail. And then I said, I need to make a decision here. My life is my life. I can't give that control up to someone else. So I made an appointment with this person and sat down with him. And I said, I need to share a story with you. I said, you know that we used to work together. None of that's secret. It's all history. Yeah. I said, but I need to tell you that I spent a long time blaming you for my circumstance.
So you actually confronted and shared this.
It was difficult.
Yeah.
But I said, I've blamed you for a long time, and now here you are again. And I said, blame isn't going to work. So I said, you need to know I forgive you. But I said, what would help me is I interpreted your action very personal. See, that's what blame does. It makes it personal. I said, how personal was it? And he says, Dick, he says, the board told us we needed to reduce expenses. And they gave us a goal of how many million we needed to cut out of labor. And so we sat down as a committee and we decided what positions were essential and what positions were nice, but we could survive without it. And he says, you fell in that bucket. And he says, it wasn't personal. And he says, I knew you were hurting, but...
It was just the job description.
And he says, I knew you were hurting, but I didn't want to make it worse. And he might have, if he called me up, and said, I'm sorry, I might have blown up at him.
Yeah.
When I heard that, it reminded me that I was fueling the flame of blame. I was the one that was interpreting him without even knowing. I was the one that was holding on to it. And that meeting helped me to reinforce how destructive blame was and how much of my life I wasted that was unnecessary if I'd have realized how that captures you, how that contains you, and how that distorts you.
That's important to share. And I just like I said, I know that that can be really difficult to have some of those conversations, to
Yes.
bring that up. But
It was.
in some ways, it sounds like that was kind of the final chains dropping of that particular instance,
Yes.
at least, and probably huge steps forward just in general with the issue of.
We worked
blaming.
well from there on.
Yeah.
Now, in all this full disclosure, I always had this little tinge,
Yeah.
but I realized that that was an old message, and that I could stay above that because we
Yes.
worked well together.
Yes.
And I finished my career without getting fired.
Yeah, well, hey, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. That's a good thing. And what's it been like to live without that tendency to blame others?
So one of the things I learned, and this really helped free me, is that while I was living in a cage of blame, trapped, I expected something outside of my world to rescue me. I was hoping somebody would come and say, I'm sorry, didn't mean to do that, you're a good person. None of that happened. And what I realized was I had the key in my own hand. I just needed to use it. And that was empowering because things happen. People say things that hurt. And either I go back in that cage and resent that person, blame that person, etc., or I realize that I have a key all the time. I'm the master of my life.
Yes.
I'm the one that decides what direction my life goes. And so if I feel myself locked in a cage of resentment, hurt, and blame, realize that you have a key called forgiveness. You can unlock that door and set yourself free. And when I compare my life, those months of dark blame, bitterness, to a life of working with others, being engaged, caring about others, being cared for by others, there is no question which the better life is. No question at all.
I love to hear that. And I sure appreciate you sharing that. I really appreciate you taking some time. And I wonder if you might take just a moment to maybe even look at the camera and tell viewers what it's like to live that unchained life. I know you had a couple more things you wanted to share.
So, first of all, there is no comparison. It is as different as light is from day. When your life is filled with blame, you are constantly bouncing between anger and bitterness and depression and despair. And that journey gets darker and darker and darker. Perhaps you've been on that journey. Perhaps you're on that journey. And you know how overwhelming it can be to feel like my life is where it is because of what others have done. A spouse that divorced you, a child that rejected you, a neighbor that doesn't like you, an employee who fires you, a church member who undermines you and says things about you that are hurtful. We know what the dark life is like, but I want to encourage you to recognize that you hold the key. You have a choice to make. You can remain bitter or you can become better. That choice is yours. And I want to encourage you, if you find yourself blaming others, stuck in a cycle of hurt and resentment for what others have done for you, that you need to get out of that trap, because there is light in this world. There are people who care. There are support groups that really listen to and understand each other. So don't live in the darkness when you have the opportunity to live in the light. I really want to encourage you to take those steps, because it is possible and it is better.
I sure appreciate that. Dick, thank you so much for spending some time here. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we finish our segment here?
No, but it's good to be with you, Nate, and to talk about blame as an addiction and the way out of that addiction to a better life.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And for those of you watching, we would love to get any questions that you might have for Dick that we'll answer at the end of our program. So once again, if you're watching and if you have a question that you'd like to have Dick answer here at the end of our program, we want to encourage you to use the link that you'll find in the video description or in the comment section. Click on that. It'll take you to a Google form. You can ask an anonymous question there. But at this time, we get to move to the segment of our program where we get to hear a message from Pastor Richie. And so we hope that you enjoy this next part as Pastor Richie shares a message of hope for us now.
Welcome to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. The only way I was able to break through the chain that held me back was when I finally was willing to admit, you know what, I don't have all the answers. What I was doing wasn't working. And so I had to start listening to other people who knew things that I didn't know. You know, I knew how to get high, but I didn't know how to get clean. I had to take the cotton out of my ears and I had to put it in my mouth. I remember I had someone at a meeting who told me very quickly early on, I was talking a lot because I had read a lot and I thought I knew a lot. And one of these old timers, is what we called them, told me, Richie, shut up, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth. You see, I had to be willing to learn something new from someone else. I had to stop acting like I was charged. I needed someone bigger, better, smarter, stronger than me to be in charge. In the book of Mark 5:22, we have an interesting story of someone who was used to being in charge. Jairus was one of the synagogue presidents, it says. He was used to being the leader. He was used to doing all the talking. But if you want to live an unchained life, you have to be willing to let someone else be in charge. You've got to be willing to listen to someone else sometime. In Mark 5:23, Jairus comes up to Jesus. He says, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come, lay hands on her so that she may be made well and live. So check this out. Jairus is telling Jesus how to heal his daughter. But Jairus doesn't know how to heal people. Jairus doesn't know how to perform miracles. Just like I didn't know how to stay clean, Jairus doesn't know what he's talking about. So in Mark 5:22, when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. So he's kneeling. He seems to be kind of praying. He's open to the eye of giving up control. But the very next verse, he starts ordering Jesus around. Have you ever used prayer to try to order God around? Have you ever tried to tell someone else what they need to be doing in their life? In recovery, we say, don't give advice. You know, advice kills. We only share experience, strength, and hope. People don't need advice. They need to hear that you got through something, and they need to hear hope of how they can get through something. We got to be willing to listen to someone else. What does Jairus know about healing? What do you know about living unchained? Before Jesus can give Jairus what he's asking for, Jairus has to let go of the control and give it over to God. Now compare Jairus' request to this centurion who also is asking Jesus to heal someone. Luke 7:7 and 8. It says, I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, Jesus, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and they go, and to another, come, and they come, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. The centurion was a good leader because, you see, he knew how to be led. Before you can ever lead, you got to first learn how to be led. In spite of Jairus, Jesus still goes with him. Man, I am so glad, in spite of some of the dumb things that I've said, I've had good friends who've still been willing to go with me. In spite of our problems, our big egos, in spite of the incessant fighting and debating, Jesus still goes. Instead of telling Jairus, Jesus is going to show Jairus. Some of us, we only learn by being shown. We can't take someone's word for it. We've got to experience the pain for ourselves. Mark 5:25, there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. So here we have another character come into the scene. On the way to Jairus' house, something is getting in the way of Jairus' plan. Man, we hate it when things get in the way of our plans, don't we? But sometimes interruptions are interventions. Sometimes the thing that we think is getting in the way is actually the best possible thing that could happen for us. Man, I can see Jairus pushing Jesus with one hand, come on, Jesus, I got to get you going where I'm going, and he's batting people away with the other hand. Jesus is in a hurry, and it seems like Jesus is taking his time. I wonder, has God ever seemed to take his time in your life? Maybe he's trying to teach you something. Maybe he's trying to show you something. And so this woman in Mark 5:28, she says, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. The Greek word for healed means rescued. You see, God wants to rescue you from what's killing you. God wants to rescue you from whatever is draining you. In Mark 5:26, this woman had suffered much under many physicians. She had spent all she had and was no better. Rather, she grew worse. So think about it. She had tried all kinds of things. I know for me, man, I had tried all kinds of things to quit using opioids. I tried a lot of things to quit all kinds of addictions and to live an unchained life. This woman has tried all kinds of things, but instead of it getting better, it's only growing worse. She had plenty of people's opinions. She had plenty of treatment options. Her purse was full of prescriptions, but she's still bleeding. She's still not enjoying life. Think of all the stuff this woman had to push through to get to Jesus. Man, she had to push through the people telling her it was all in her head. She had to push through all the people who said, you know what, once an addict, always an addict. She had to push through all the critics and the naysayers and the haters. She had to push past the internal voice that says, you're always going to be this way. You're a mess up. You will never live an unchained life. She had to push past the toxic voices in her life. If I can just reach out and touch him, I'll be healed. If I can just tap into something stronger than me. And so she comes up behind him. In the crowd, she touches his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Check it out. Jesus was able to stop the bleeding no one else could stop. Jesus could fix a problem no one else could fix. You see, we cannot fix our own problem because we are a part of the problem. If we want to live an unchained life, we've got to tap into something stronger than we are. I can't, he can. I think I'll let him. And Jesus realized at once that the healing power had gone out of him. And so he turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my robe? And the disciples are like, well, what? I mean, Jesus, you see this crowd crushing you and you ask who touched me? But check this out. Jesus knows the difference between someone putting their hands on him to push him or a need that pulls him. And this is why I believe when something pulled at him, instead of pushing him, it changed his direction. You see, that's what separated the woman from Jairus. You see, the woman's need pulled Jesus. Jairus was trying to push Jesus. In John 10:18, Jesus says, look, no one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. You see, friends, it wasn't the push that put Jesus on the cross. It was his love for us that pulled him there. Stop letting people and problems push you around. Stop letting addiction push you around. Stop letting other people decide what is best for your life. Stop chaining yourself to that toxic relationship. Stop letting them push you and let God pull you into your purpose. Man, in the massive crowd, Jesus can discern one touch. God can feel your loneliness in a crowded room. He can see your brokenness in a broken world. He knows what's draining us, and if we would just reach out and touch him, he'll stop the bleeding. And so Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Meanwhile, I imagine Jairus just kind of looking at his watch. What are you doing, Jesus? Man, I've got something to do. I'm important. This woman had a bleeding problem, which meant, according to that custom, that Jewish custom, she would have been ceremonially unclean. She was unclean. She shouldn't touch Jesus. No doubt, Jairus, being a president of the synagogue, hey, you don't have time to mess with that unclean person. I'm important. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, and she fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Check it out. It says the whole truth. Remember, Jairus is in a hurry. The Greek word for whole truth means everything. She tells Jesus everything, every detail. She's been sick for 12 years. She tells the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. She tells Jesus every detail. Jairus is tapping his foot, but you see, Jesus will not be pushed around. And while this woman is testifying, Jairus' daughter is dying. I don't have time for this, he probably thought. But you know what? I've discovered in life it's not all about me. It's not all about what I want. At the core of addiction is selfishness. It's not all about you. It's not all about me. You know, sometimes we act like we're the only people with problems. Sometimes we act like we're the only ones that need help. You know, my sponsor once told me in recovery, he said, Richie, I know it may look like the sun rises and sets over your head, but you are not the center of the universe. You see, Jesus is going to deal with Jairus' problem, but he's going to deal with this woman's problem along the way. Jesus is on his way to deal with your problem, but one of the ways he's going to deal with your problem is by dealing with someone else's problem along the way, because your greatest problem is not what you think it is. Your greatest problem, my greatest problem, it's me. And nothing gets me out of me quicker than helping someone else. And we're going to talk about this more in session 9. But to God, no one is more important than anyone else. I don't care the person living up under the bridge or the person in the house with a 5-car garage. No one's more important than anyone else. No one's problems is more important than anyone else. The nameless, unclean Gentile woman is just as important to Jesus as the famous Jewish male leader. You know, too often, like Jairus, we want to tell God what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, and when he's going to do it. But that doesn't work. That's a part of the problem. We're trying to be God instead of letting God be God. Before Jesus can heal his daughter, Jesus has to heal Jairus. Mark 5:35, as he said this, some people arrived from the synagogue, the president's house. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? And so that small glimmer of hope leaves Jairus' eyes. In that moment, he realizes just how small he really is. And that, my friends, is when Jesus can really help him. Sometimes we've got to get knocked off our high horse. Sometimes, we've got to just hit that bottom. Sometimes we've got to fall down for God to finally be able to get through to us. Mark 5:36. But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. Interestingly, the Greek word for overhearing means refused to listen or ignore. Check that out. Jesus ignores what the people say. He looks right into Jairus' hopeless eyes and he says, do not fear, only believe. I don't care what anybody else thinks. God is ignoring the skeptics. He's ignoring the critics, and he's looking at you. Do not fear, only believe. They're not in charge. I am. So the moment we stop limiting God by what we can do, we can start seeing what God can do. 1 Corinthians 2:9 says, no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. Ephesians 3:20 says, God is capable of doing far, far more than we could ever ask or imagine. You see, Jairus came to Jesus for healing, but Jesus was planning something better. Jesus wasn't just planning on a healing. Jesus was planning a resurrection. Man, God's plans for us are always bigger than our plans for us. God's idea for an unchained life, living freely and abundantly, is always bigger. When my first year clean, my sponsor told me to write down all the things I wanted to see, all my plans and goals for living my first year clean. He says, Richie, write down everything that you want to see happen, and I promise you, God's going to blow your expectations to smithereens. Because to be honest, I just wanted to hold a job. I just wanted to get a job. I just didn't want to go away to prison. I started making that list. In a year, when I hit that year mark, man, not only did I have a job, I had my family back. I had my relationships were started flourishing again. I started serving in my community. I got so many more things. God's plans for you are always bigger than your plans for you. Mark 5:38, they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child's not dead, but sleeping. And check it out, they laughed at him. Has anyone ever laughed at you? When the scoffers come between Jesus and his miracle, it says that he kicked them out. Whatever is coming between you and your miracle, let God kick it out. Verse 40 says, he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. In ancient Israel, they actually hired mourners, which means many of these people mourning weren't really upset. They were paid to be upset. And that's why they go from crying one moment to laughing the next. You know, there are people in your life who will go from patting you on the back one moment to stabbing you in the back the next moment. And look, I believe in being kind to everyone, but my inner circle is saved for those who want to see God do a miracle. My inner circle, the people that I'm going to spend the most time with, are going to be the people that want to see me succeed, that believe in me. It's time to kick all the fake, pretentious people out of your life because they are coming between you and your miracle. Jairus and his wife are totally overwhelmed by grief. They still can't believe that their little girl is gone. But then she encounters Christ and they find out that death is nothing more than a sleep when it comes to God. Mark 10:27 says, all things are possible with God. Where there is Jesus, there is always a way. Don't ask for a little help. You need more than a little help. All of us do. We don't need help. We need the hand of God to change us, to free us. Mark 5:41, taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, get up. Man, Jesus is saying the same thing to everyone who's watching right now. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get up. Both the bleeding woman and the girl were ceremonially unclean. One was dead, one had a disease. Touch was forbidden, but Jesus reaches out and touches them both. Because you see, until you have an encounter with something stronger than you, then you'll never have that fuller, freer life. The girl lived for 12 years. Think about that. The woman suffered for 12 years. So the beginning of suffering and the beginning of life happened at the same time. When the woman's suffering started, it was the beginning of life for the girl. You see, friends, Christ's suffering was the beginning of our new life. Because he went into the tomb, you and I can come out of the tomb. In order to stop our bleeding, God was willing to come in the flesh and bleed. You want to know what a real leader looks like? You want to know someone you can really trust with your life? Luke 9:51 says, when the days drew near for him to be taken, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. The same hand that healed the woman, the same hand that raised the girl, can touch your life right now, today. Jairus thought he needed Jesus just for his daughter. Maybe you're watching this because you think this is for someone else. We always tend to think in that way, you know, well, I don't struggle with addiction. No. Just as Jairus thought he needed Jesus for his daughter, Jesus had to show Jairus that he needed Jesus just as much. Man, people struggling with addiction aren't the only ones who need to practice these principles. All of us do. You see, Jairus' daughter was not the only one who came back to life that day. So did Jairus. Let God lead your life. Let God be in charge. Stop acting like you know everything. Let someone who knows what they're doing help you, guide you. Stop shortchanging living an unchained life. Allow that chain of ego and pride and self-obsession and control get broken by the breakthrough of humility today. I don't have to control everything. I don't have to have all the answers anymore. The day I started listening and learning is the day I started living an unchained life. God wants the same thing for you right now.
Hey, welcome back. It's always such a blessing to be able to be reminded of the hope that we have through those powerful stories in Scripture. Richie, thank you. Pastor Richie, thank you for sharing those messages with us this evening. At this time, we have an opportunity to turn to our Q&A time with our guest for this evening, Dick Tibbetts. Dick, once again, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
For those of you watching, we want to remind you that you can use the link on the video description and in the comment section to write anonymous questions if you'd like to. I have a question to start us off with, though. So you've been here this evening, and your testimony deals with the topic of using blame as a way of dealing with problems, or essentially not dealing with problems, and how it can be an addiction. And to start off with, Dick, how can someone identify if blame is an issue in their life? Because it's kind of one of those things that I think can go under the surface.
Sure. Oh, first of all, we all blame to some level or another, but when it becomes a problem is when it becomes my go-to strategy when I've been hurt. When someone says something about me that's painful, when somebody does something that I don't appreciate, where do I go to first? And if I'm going to blame right away, and I find myself then embellishing that blame, making it bigger and more and stronger, and then I find myself being captured by that blame. It's starting to dominate my life. And the way you know that is that's what you're thinking about. So ask yourself over the last 24 hours, what am I thinking about? Or who am I been thinking about? And if I keep falling on a certain person or a certain event, and that pattern keeps repeating itself day after day, week after week, then I'm probably becoming addicted to blame. So it's not if I blame somebody for something and it's gone. That's just, we all do that.
Sure.
But when it begins to dominate, when it begins to overemphasize my thoughts, and it stays continuous, day after day, week after week, it really becomes dangerous when it's month after month and year after year.
Sure.
But when I find myself gravitating to pain and getting stuck there, then I most likely have an addiction to pain that's going to have to be dealt with.
That's well said. And the follow-up question I would have for that is, while you touched on this before, what are some steps that people can take to help pull them out of that addiction of blaming others?
So there's some very clear steps. I'm glad you asked that. So we'll go over those. The first step is to stop taking things so personal. People do things the way they do it because that's who they are. And so I just happen to be in the way. It's so easy to wonder, what did I do wrong? Why are they blaming me? What's going on here? Depersonalize it. Let that be what they did. I need to do what I do. When I over-personalize it, I'm thinking, they're out to get me. I'm making myself the center of this problem, when I'm probably not. So number one, depersonalize it. Number two, be very careful of all or nothing thinking. I've seen people that were best friends become worse enemies.
It's always sad to see that.
And they're the same people. What changed? Well, what changed is what they focused on, all or nothing. If I focus on the good things about someone, we have a friendship. If I focus on the bad things about someone, we don't like each other. Or I can flip. I focus on the good things of you, but then something happened, and all of a sudden I'm just thinking about your bad traits. Blame focuses on the bad traits. It makes your world dark. Be careful of all or nothing thinking. Every single person is a mixture of good and bad. And how I see them, it depends on what I focus on. Blame focuses on the negative. And the third problem with blame is it puts all the solution out there. The responsibility for my happiness is in someone else's hands.
Which is always a dangerous place to put it.
Think about it. The very person I don't like who did this thing is the one that I hope will like me enough to make my life better.
Yeah.
So I like to remind people that responsibility is my ability to choose my response. So the third element of recognizing blame is when I don't take responsibility, but rather I shift that responsibility for my happiness on someone else. So I have this little drawing. You did something I don't like. Therefore, I'm upset at you. You need to apologize to me, and if you don't, then I come to the conclusion that my life is your fault. And you know what? To our listeners today, I want to say this. Your life is your life. And your life is what you choose it to be. Oh yeah, along the journey, people do things that hurt. People do things that trip me up. That's life. Life isn't fair. But how you respond to that will determine whether you find your own life in freedom or whether you become entrapped in the bitterness of blame.
Dick, once again, thank you so much for coming and sharing. Just wise words that you've shared, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here with you, Nate.
Thank you so much. For those of you watching, once again, it's time to announce our winner for our drawing for Pastor Richie's book, a signed copy of it, The Darkness Will Not Overcome. And this evening, Joy, you are the one who has won this book. We'll make sure to email you this evening to find out if you want us to mail this to, or if you want to pick it up here at the church. But congratulations, Joy, to winning this. And hey, thank you all of you who are able to watch this evening, or perhaps you're watching this later at a later time. Thanks for taking the time to invest in finding out how to have more freedom from those things that hold us back. Our prayer is that this whole community can find greater healing and hope from that which holds us back. And we know we can find that through Christ. So thanks for your time this evening. We hope you have a good evening, and we hope to see you here tomorrow at 7:15. Thanks so much, and God bless.